I never planned to be a parent. Not in the one day, maybe, way. I mean, I never saw it. Never felt the tug. No quiet urge to pass down anything. I liked my space, my silence, my life. I had a good routine. Up at 6, coffee, run with my dog Ranger, home by 7:30, work in IT, sleep like a log. That changed the day my phone rang at 10:52 p.m. on a Thursday. It was Emily, my brother's ex. We hadn't spoken in months. I picked up, already bracing for whatever drama Caleb had managed to unleash this time. But her voice wasn't angry. It was thin, dry, like it had run out of tears. "Can you take Liam? Just for a few days." Liam, my nephew, 8 years old. Last time I saw him, he was 7 and quiet, distant. We'd spent the afternoon building a Lego spaceship that looked more like a block of cheese. Caleb never showed. I cleared my throat. "What's going on?" I need some time. Things aren't good right now." That was all she gave me. I said yes, because what else could I say? 2 days later, she dropped him off on my porch. No big goodbye. No emotional hug. Just a worn-out duffel bag, a stuffed blue dinosaur, and a kid who looked like he'd already figured out the world doesn't keep its promises. "Hey, Uncle Jax," he said, like it was nothing. I hadn't heard my name said like that in years. The first few days were chaos. He was quiet but not shy, more like cautious. Watched everything. Slept curled up with Ranger. Didn't like the dark. Didn't talk about his mom. Never mentioned Caleb. I didn't push. We just figured it out. Day by day. Toast in the morning. Cartoons. Homework. Silence. Then, 2 weeks in, I realized Emily hadn't called once. I texted. Nothing. Called. Straight to voicemail. Then one night, Liam asked, mid-dinner, "Is my dad ever coming back?" I didn't know what to say, because I hadn't heard from Caleb in almost a year, and I was starting to think I never would again. By week 3, the routine started to feel real. Liam woke up at 6:45, always before me. He liked waffles with too much syrup. He talked to Ranger like the dog could actually answer. He wouldn't say much during breakfast, but every so often, he'd look at me like he was checking if I was still there. I kept telling myself this was temporary. Emily would call. She had to. I left messages, sent emails, drove past her apartment complex. The mailbox was stuffed. Her car was gone. The property manager said she'd moved out mid-month. No forwarding address. By the 5th week, I called an attorney. Not to sue anyone, just to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. Could I enroll Liam in school? Take him to the doctor? Was this even legal? Turned out, no, not really. Not without emergency guardianship. So I filed the paperwork. I signed forms that said temporary caregiver, but it didn't feel temporary anymore. There was this one moment, small, but it hit me harder than I expected. We were at the grocery store. Liam stood next to me at the checkout, watching me unload cereal and apples. The cashier smiled and asked, "And this is your son?" Before I could answer, Liam said, "I'm his nephew, but I'm living with him now." No hesitation, no sadness, just fact. And I realized something. He was adjusting faster than I was. That night, I found a drawing taped to the fridge. It was 2 stick figures, me and him, holding hands. Ranger too, with a huge smiley face. The caption read, "Me and Uncle Jax. And Ranger. We're a team." I sat at the kitchen table staring at it for a long time. Then I cried. Quietly. Carefully. After Liam was asleep. Because I wasn't ready for this. But neither was he. And somehow, we were doing it anyway. I wasn't looking for anything more than a birth certificate. Liam needed it for school registration. There was a pile of documents Emily had left behind when she dropped him off, stuffed in an old grocery bag, crumpled folders, and a few sheets still sticky with juice stains. I'd ignored it for weeks. Part of me didn't want to dig through her mess. Another part didn't want to admit how permanent this was starting to feel. But the school was insistent, and I was tired of apologizing to secretaries. So I spent a Saturday afternoon on the living room floor, sorting through Liam's old pediatric reports, preschool artwork, loose photos, vaccination cards. Somewhere between a half-completed coloring book and a daycare contract from 2018, I found a bent manila folder that looked older than the rest. It was thicker, heavier, sealed shut with 2 strips of worn tape. It had my name on the front. Not Jackson, not Uncle. Just 3 shaky letters, in blocky handwriting I hadn't seen in years. JX. I stared at it for a long time before I even touched it. I knew that handwriting. Caleb used to write like that when we were kids, capital letters, sharp corners, the X always off kilter. I opened it slowly, like I might break it. Inside, there were school reports from when Liam was younger, some copies of his birth record, and a white envelope. Sealed. Also marked, Jax. My chest tightened. My first thought was something was wrong. Terminal. Final. I wasn't sure I even wanted to read it. But I opened it anyway. The letter was short. Sloppy ink. A few words crossed out and rewritten. I imagined him writing it at night. Alone. Jax, I don't know if you'll ever see this. Or want to. You probably think I ran again. Maybe I did. But this time wasn't the same. Everything got heavier. I couldn't keep Liam in that mess. I couldn't let him see me the way I was. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to vanish without you knowing why. He's better off with you. Always has been. If I don't come back, it's not because I didn't care. It's because I cared too much to let him watch me fall apart. I love you. Take care of him. Caleb. I sat there with it in my hands for what felt like an hour. It didn't sound like someone making excuses. It didn't even sound like Caleb. It sounded like someone who knew he'd failed and was trying to fail quietly. That hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent years building up anger toward him. Every missed birthday, every broken promise, every call he never returned. I wore it like armor. And now, that armor felt stupid. Heavy. Like I'd been carrying it for someone who was already bleeding underneath. I didn't know if he was alive. I didn't know if he was in prison, or rehab, or 6 feet under. But I knew one thing. He didn't leave because he didn't care. He left because he couldn't carry himself anymore. And now, somehow, that weight was mine. It was just paperwork. That's all. Just another Tuesday of forms and forgotten logins, and hold music. I'd taken a half day from work to finalize Liam's healthcare access. The state had programs for guardians, especially temporary ones, but you had to jump through hoops to get them. I was on the state services portal, scrolling through an endless list of partner clinics and agencies. Most of them were miles away, and half the links were dead. But one PDF, a partner resource sheet for mental health referrals, loaded fine. I wasn't even paying attention, just skimming, scrolling, until I saw the name. Caleb R. Intake, January 12th, 20XX. Status, active. Facility, Riversend Behavioral Recovery Center. I froze. Caleb's last name isn't common. Neither is mine. But what made my stomach drop was the birth year listed next to it. Same as his. I clicked the facility link. Legit site. Licensed. Private. Residential treatment. No pictures, no fluffy branding. Just intake info and a single number for family contact. I stared at it for a long time. Then I dialed. A calm voice answered. Riversend Center. This is Maria. My throat tightened. Hi, I'm trying to confirm if someone is a patient there. Caleb R. Are you family? I hesitated. Then, yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then, he's here. Been with us since January. He mentioned you. Me? Your name's listed as emergency contact. You weren't before. He added it last month. I sat back in the chair, the air knocked out of me. He was alive. He was in rehab. He'd listed me. Me. Is he okay? He's trying, she said. That's the best kind of okay we've got here. When I got off the call, I walked out to the porch, sat down on the steps, and stared at nothing. He didn't disappear. He tried to disappear responsibly, and I had no idea what the hell to do with that. I didn't tell Liam right away. Not because I didn't want to. Because I didn't know how. How do you tell an 8-year-old? Your dad didn't leave because he stopped loving you. He left because he didn't love himself enough to stay? The truth was too messy, and I wasn't sure if I even believed it yet. After I got off the call with Riversend, I walked around the block 3 times. No music, no phone, just me and the crunch of gravel under my shoes and 100 versions of the conversation playing in my head. When I came back, Liam was sitting on the floor building a spaceship out of old cereal boxes and duct tape. Ranger sat next to him, tail thumping slowly. The TV was on but muted. He looked up at me and asked, "Did you find out where my dad went?" Not is he okay? Not is he coming back? Just that. I sat down across from him. Tried to meet him where he was, with cardboard, glue stains, and 1,000 unspoken questions. He's somewhere safe, I said. Liam didn't react right away. Just kept folding foil into what I think was a satellite dish. He's getting help, I added. That made him stop. He looked at me, eyes wide, but not scared. More like hopeful. Like when my mom went to the talking doctor. Sort of, I said, but for different stuff. He's working on feeling better, so he can be better. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked something that gutted me. Are you mad at him? I took a long breath. My first instinct was to say no, to protect him, to smooth it over. But that wouldn't be fair, not to Liam, and not to me. Yes, I said. A little. I was. I still am sometimes. He nodded like he understood. I think I'm mad too, he whispered. But I don't want to be. I reached over and ruffled his hair. Me neither. That night, he left a drawing on my desk. It was him, me, Ranger, and someone far away in the background. Not gone. Just small. He wrote, maybe one day we'll all be in the same picture. I sat with that for a long time. Because maybe. He already forgave his dad more than I ever could. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not Liam. Not my coworkers. Not even myself, until I was already halfway there. I packed a thermos of coffee, filled the tank, and pulled onto the highway at 6:12 a.m. 3 hours of nothing but road and thoughts I couldn't outrun. There was no speech, no plan, just one sentence that kept circling in my head like a drain. You left, and I was the one who stayed. Riverside Recovery sat at the edge of a small town that looked like it hadn't changed since 1995. The building itself was plain, low to the ground, and surrounded by pine trees. Clean, quiet. I walked into the lobby like someone walking into a courthouse, half dreading, half hoping. The woman at the front desk looked up and smiled like she'd seen 100 versions of me before. Maybe she had. Who are you here to see? Caleb R. She clicked a few keys. He's approved for family visits. I'll page someone. I waited 14 minutes in that lobby. Longest 14 minutes of my life. Then a nurse came and led me down a hallway that smelled like eucalyptus and unsaid things. We stepped into a small garden space. Just 2 benches. One man already sitting. Caleb. He stood when he saw me. Same frame. Thinner. Older. Like life had shaken something loose inside him, and it never settled again. Jax, he said. I didn't answer right away. Just looked at him. He looked away first. I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think I would either. We sat. It was silent for a while. Birds somewhere above us made sounds I didn't recognize. Then, without looking at me, he said, I didn't want you to carry it. I knew what he meant. The mess. The weight. The kid. The shame. Well, I said, I carried it anyway. We sat in that garden for maybe 20 minutes without saying anything important. We talked about the weather. The coffee. Ranger. He smiled when I said Liam still made spaceships out of cereal boxes. But his smile didn't reach all the way up. There was a tiredness in his eyes that didn't look like sleep deprivation. It looked like guilt that had set into the bone. Then he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded piece of lined paper. He held it out without looking at me. It's for Liam, he said. I've rewritten it 6 times. This one felt the least fake. I took it. Didn't open it. He added, I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, but if the time comes, I'll give it to him, I said. And I meant it. He looked surprised. Maybe because I said it so easily. Maybe because he thought I'd say no. I used to think, he said slowly, that disappearing was better than failing in front of him. That if I just stepped out, he wouldn't have to watch me fall apart. I let that sit for a moment. Yeah, I said. And instead he watched silence grow in the place where his dad used to be. That one hit. He flinched, like I'd slapped him. Fair, he whispered. The rest of the visit was quieter. I left the garden without hugging him. I'm not sure if he expected it, but as I turned back for one last look, he raised a hand, a small wave. I drove home with the letter on the passenger seat, unopened. At a red light, I glanced at it. It was soft from being folded too many times. The corner was slightly torn. There was a tiny grease smudge near the top, like he'd written it with shaking hands between cafeteria meals. This wasn't a confession. It was a man who lost everything, trying to give his son at least one truth. I didn't give Liam the letter that day, or the next. I kept it in the top drawer of my desk, under a folder of bills and old receipts, tucked inside a clean white envelope with his name on the front. My handwriting, not Caleb's. I figured someday he'd ask, and when he did, I'd be ready. But days turned into weeks, then months. Life, as it tends to do, moved on not because we forgot, but because we had to keep living. Liam settled into school, got better at math, discovered he hated broccoli but loved reading about planets. He made 2 friends who came over on Saturdays and filled the apartment with the kind of noise I used to dread, but now secretly loved. Every now and then he'd mention his dad. In small ways. Dad used to say Pluto should still be a planet. Dad made the best grilled cheese. Dad sang in the car, even when it was bad. I never pushed, never pried. Then one night, after dinner, he asked me the question I knew would come. Does my dad think about me? I didn't lie. Every day, I said. He nodded slowly. Is he okay? He's getting better. I told him. He's trying really hard. He looked down at his plate, where the last bite of mac and cheese had gone cold. Then he said, softly, if he wrote something, could I read it? I didn't move, didn't speak, just stood up, walked to my desk, opened the drawer, and handed him the envelope. He took it with both hands, held it like something fragile, then walked to the couch and sat. Didn't open it right away, just stared for a while. And finally, he read. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to do dishes, heart pounding with every page turn. He didn't cry. He didn't say much. Just came over afterward, hugged me around the waist, and whispered, thanks for saving it. That night, I tucked him into bed, turned off the light, and paused at the door. Hey, I said, you okay? He nodded. I'm glad he wrote it. Then he added, almost like a secret, now I don't have to wonder anymore. And I realized, that was all the letter was ever meant to do. Not fix anything, not undo the past, just make the wondering stop.